An interesting comparison in politics. The nation of Canada, our neighbors to the north, Trudeau just resigned yesterday. And he was pushed out because of policies and because of the Canadian people are looking in a different direction. And I wanted to go over a little of this just because I think it's important that, again, the pendulum in politics swings. I don't beat my chest and think that everybody's starting to think like me, and Republicans should be afraid of that. They should be worried if they think that way, because that's not the case. The political pendulum continues to swing back and forth. And we've watched when it comes to crime. If you look back, go all the way back to the Clinton administration and the 3 strikes laws that were put in place. People were fed up with crime. So the idea, if you commit 3 felonies, if you're convicted of 3 felonies, you have these very long-term sentences because you've proven yourself unworthy to live in society and people need to be protected. And then what ended up happening is you go back the Obama administration and then especially the Trump administration, where a lot of those things were reversed and clemency was given to people that were not necessarily dangerous offenders, and some of them were simple drug offenders that were being put in prison. I'm not saying this was the opinion of some, that these sentences were not fitting the crimes, that somebody that had 3 felonies because they were dealing in marijuana or whatever it was were going to prison for 20 plus years. So you began to see that going in a different direction. Well, here we are now. Look at how the immigration has swung. You go back years ago and you look at where we were with SB 1070 in Arizona, and then you look at how it swung in the other direction and how people were looking at immigration with the DREAM Act under the Obama administration, even though he deported so many people that were in the country illegally, the policies of the Biden administration versus the policies of the Trump administration. So we understand that that pendulum swings back and forth. It's fascinating. There's a story from thehill.com, and it talks about the 5 things to know about the political crisis that's happening. Why did Trudeau resign is the first of the 5. Let me just read the beginning of this. And if this was the United States, you would hear it exactly the same way. The rising cost of living, increasing anti-immigrant sentiment, and concerns over President-elect Trump's economic threats to Canada have all contributed to growing disillusionment with the Trudeau's leadership. Immigration and the economy and cost of living. People are people. And it's just that simple. Do I think that Canada is becoming this red nation where there's going to be this major red wave? No, I know a lot of people from Canada, and I know some really conservative people from Canada. And they are ultra conservative in their thinking, and they don't like the direction their government has taken. And now it seems like there's been a breaking point. That doesn't mean the majority of Canadians are all of a sudden going to swing conservative. But what they're seeing is the policies of the government have overwhelmed the people. Their stance on immigration is damaging, not because immigrants are bad, but because we have to vet people as they come into our country. That's our country and in their country. That a vetting process to make sure you're bringing in quality people is not an unreasonable expectation. When you look at the cost of living, look what's happened in the United States. If anybody believes that wasn't the connection, I will give you another example. I worked very hard. I shouldn't say that because I don't think it was work. I enjoyed my time, but I spent a lot of time volunteering on the re-election campaign for George W. Bush. For me, it was a lot of time. I was not an employee. I did it as a volunteer. And I spent a lot of time working on that perspective of encouraging people to vote for George W. Bush. And I still think he is a great person. But we know what happened at the end of his term when the real estate bubble burst. The dip in the recession that came with it was blamed on him because he was the president. There's a lot of arguments about what the real reasons are or if it was fully his fault. It doesn't matter. The president of the United States, people vote with their wallets. And if you look back at the election in 2008, John McCain was a much more qualified person at the time to be president than Barack Obama. That's not an insult. It just is. John McCain was the most recognizable name in American politics. No one knew foreign policy like he did. We were fighting wars in 2 different countries. But what they were able to do is, and it was an effective thing, is Barack Obama, President Obama, but at that time Senator Obama, was able to connect and make the argument to the American people that 4 years of John McCain economy would be 4 more years of the Bush economy. And he won. Now, there's other reasons as well, but that connection, that the voters vote with their wallets. Canada is dealing with high cost of living, a housing crisis, and immigration problems. Does that not sound familiar? So people are people. The idea that whether it's Chuck Schumer saying that they didn't explain well enough to the American people how much they care about them and how much their policies help them. No, the American people are smart. The idea that they're dumb, it bothers me. The arguments I'm having with people on social media, somebody sent me this ridiculous video about January 6th of 2021. The American people aren't stupid. We are well aware of what Donald Trump is and was and what he brings to the table, and they chose him over Vice President Harris, period. They're not stupid. The American people said maybe we need to move away from Trump, and we elected Joe Biden. Now, I didn't vote for Biden, but the American people did. So they were smart then. But now when they reelect Donald Trump, now they're stupid again. That's where the problem with all of this lies. The similarities just shows that people are people. And the Canadian people, as much as we hear about their great free healthcare system and everything else, the Canadian people are looking at a government that is getting into the pockets of their people. As Reagan said, and I'm sure it holds true for the Canadian government like it did for the U.S. government, we don't have high inflation because the people are living too well. We have high inflation because the government is living too well. And the people of Canada are speaking their minds. Now, I don't know who's going to be the replacement in Canada, but you can't ignore the similarities in the issues and the problems and the solutions to the voters. The guy comes into power. He's been there for quite a long time. His father was also the prime minister, but the facts are still the facts. The Canadian people's quality of life has diminished. The cost of living has gone through the roof, and people are fed up, so they want to change. The American people voted for Donald Trump, and it isn't because they're racist. It isn't because they were racist or there was any kind of problem with sexist because it was a woman. No, they didn't like the plan of what's happened over the last 4 years, and they thought that we were going to get 4 more years of the same. Period.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch the first season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.